Hey guys.
Hey everyone, how's everyone doing? Just invited a few people here to as speakers, kind of regular contributors here. Hello to everyone who's new.
Hello.
So we'll just give it a couple more minutes, and then we'll try to kick things off. Everybody can hear me well, right? Line's good.
I can hear
Last
you.
time we had
Yeah,
a few.
hearing you
Awesome.
well.
Cool. Let's hope it stays that way.
Is
Last time we had a few technical problems here.
is my audio quality palatable?
It is. It
Yes,
sounds good.
Cool.
silky smooth as ever. How are you doing today, Alexa?
I'm doing all right. How about you, Christoph? What's on your mind today? What are you thinking about this community call? It's kind of interesting, an interesting switch in formats.
Yeah, I think well, I try to make things largely dependent on the feedback from everyone. Last week was kind of or 3 weeks ago, the last community call was kind of an experiment. A few people had mentioned we could use Twitter Spaces, and then we tried it out. And after a few initial technical issues, it worked out pretty well. And then there was asked around, and there was positive feedback. And so here we are. We are again this time. And what's on my mind on a community call day is always the community call, because of course I think it's a nice time where everybody can get together and chat about things. And I think it's important to make it about what people want to talk about. So for this one today, maybe we'll just kick things off while we're at it. So for the call today, when I thought about what we could talk about for this one, we're dealing with Lightning UX in the guide. That's the kind of the primary focus of that one particular project that some people in the community are working on. And there are just a lot of conversations around Lightning that popped up. And so I asked around, and three specific topics came up that I think we can try to tackle today. The first one was backing up Lightning wallets. So a bunch of research is happening. A few people are looking into it, and so there are certain issues around standardization that are going on. There's also just the general research about what needs to be backed up, what does that data look like, what are the mechanisms that can be used, how do we present it to users, kind of more foundational stuff. The second topic was around contacts, and for that one, I would like for Johns to maybe become active because he's super excited about that. And the third topic that was brought up was self-custodial inter-app communication. That probably doesn't make sense to a lot of people. But what it means is that, let's say you have a wallet on your phone and you use another app, and you want to use that wallet to pay inside of another application. Traditionally, that's kind of easy to do because you have a server somewhere that can handle the communication. But if you're fully self-custodial, then how do you allow, like, from a UX perspective, from a technical perspective, how do you allow these payments and transactions to be made? So that was the third topic, and maybe we can just try to give 20 minutes to each topic. How does that sound? Or is there anything else you'd like to chat about? And for anyone listening in, feel free to raise your hand and chime in, and then we can have a good conversation.
Cool. Let's do it.
All right, cool. So let's start with the backup topic. So to give a very quick overview, I think I kind of see four different types of data that wallets need to store. The first one is kind of the recovery phrase. which is kind of the foundation. Those are the traditional 12 words from which, an on-chain Bitcoin wallet can be derived from. I can write them down on a piece of paper, and that pretty much does the job. It's very minimal and very powerful. It gets a little bit more complicated if you also want to store a derivation path, maybe some other information, and then you get into the topic of descriptor, which are almost like little pieces of code that you use to back up and restore a wallet. And those never change. Like your recovery phrase never changes. It's always the same. If you get into multi-key wallets, then you need the, coordination setup. So in a multi-key wallet, you bring together multiple keys and you form a new wallet out of this. So you need to kind of have store that information. That also doesn't change. Now, if you get into Lightning world, you get into always changing data. So that could be the basic information about the channels that you have, the current state of those channels, if you've made some transaction, and then certain historical information. And that changes all the time, right? So you can't just store it once, but you have consistently, store it on your phone or on a cloud backup or so. So it needs different techniques. And then something that is really just for users is user data. That's any settings in the application, could be transaction labels, your contacts, which is not essential to backup. Like your wallet will work without that, but it's for the users. It's obviously great if everything that they do is also synced and backed up and restored. And the topic, one of the things that came up recently, and I think Daniel, you looked into that a little bit more carefully. That was the thing that different Lightning implementations have different. They store channel data very differently, so that makes them not compatible. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So while working on updating the Bitcoin design guide, I was asking around, and understandably, I think at the moment there is no standard for doing this, but I was personally working on the assumption that there will be one, that people were working behind the scenes or kind of expected one to appear. But after asking in the LDK, the Lightning Developer Kit channel on Slack, I left with the understanding that might not ever happen. So that was kind of a new baseline for me. And the reason they gave was that it is wildly complicated. It changes a lot. And at the moment, each wallet has their own kind of channel state implementation. So yeah, that was surprising to me.
Did they happen to mention anything that could be done to kind of improve on this?
I think there was a brief mention about potentially creating some kind of emergency recovery standard or something that may not back up everything, but is able to sort of get you out of a real pinch. But there wasn't that much discussion, to be honest. I'm not sure if Steve has any views or insight in this that he could share.
Hi, can everyone hear me? I'm driving in the car, so apologize for background noise. My thoughts. I saw that thread too, Daniel. My interpretation, the response you got was from one developer on one project, so I don't think that's representative. I wouldn't take Jeff's comments as like the definitive answer from the protocol or development ecosystem. I just think it's realistically, I think the design community should push for what you're talking about, the interoperability, but realistically it's probably a couple of years away, just from a maturity of the implementations and priority for the project.
I think we're losing you, Steve. I'm not sure if anyone else is having the same.
Sounded good to me.
Now I can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
I apologize.
Okay.
I could hear Phil. Well, Steve, that's I guess more encouraging than what I took away from it. A couple of years is better than never. But I agree with you. it would be good to keep pushing the desirability of this interoperability appearing as soon as possible, and is starting from some kind of basic level, but then maybe it can evolve from there. But I also understand that the development is still ongoing, and it's hard to make a standard for a moving target.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I do think you and the design community, myself as well, should push for this. But yeah, I wouldn't interpret it as like the developers don't want this or that it's technically impossible. It's just that it's technically relative. It's not easy, technically, and probably not a near-term priority for any of the implementations. And not because it's not important. It's just that there's actually more important things to be done.
Yeah, that's fair. And I guess the takeaway for us should be that we should maybe try and insert ourselves or help wherever we can to remind people that it is important. But yeah, I get it. First you got to make it work, and then you can make it work with other applications.
Yeah, and Dev Random's comment about the recovery kit does seem like a good first step, because having like a disaster recovery interoperability is far better than nothing, and it's easier to get implementations to adopt that because there's just less complexity in doing so.
That sounds good. Yeah, let us know if we can help in any way with the LDK project or elsewhere. But otherwise, I guess we just have to recommend that people try to recover in the same application that they used to set up their Lightning wallet in the first place for now.
And to provide some context around how this conversation started, Daniel and I are working on PRs for the guide right now. He's working on the restoring a wallet section, and I'm working on the backing up a wallet section. So we've both been talking about this topic a lot. And, kind of like one of our principles on the principles page of the guide is interoperability. And so at least the kind of paradigm that, we're operating under, at least with layer one, is this idea that if you have the recovery phrase and the derivation path, if you have sufficient information and you want to stop using a particular piece of wallet software, you can take your data and restore your wallet in another wallet. And that's just becoming, a little bit more challenging with Lightning. So, I guess as Daniel said, the workaround for now is essentially tell somebody to restore their Lightning wallet in the same application and then send the funds to another wallet if they decide that they want to switch. An idea that I've been kind of pushing is just this idea that when you're building a Lightning wallet, you just need to make a clear exit path for the user. So, if you're not completely interoperable with every other Lightning wallet on the planet right now, that's okay. It's a developing technology. So that's okay, but just making it clear for the user, like if the user wants to stop using my product, how is it that they're supposed to do it? And just making sure they're understanding whether that's that your application has some kind of like disaster recovery kit that gives them all the data they need, or whether that's just providing like a tutorial page on your website that's like, okay, this is how you would restore the wallet and this is how you would send the funds somewhere else. But just, making that exit path very clear, I think, is a short-term solution in lieu of interoperability.
Yeah, and then looking a few years down the road, that's something where applications should maybe also try to make sure that they migrate people properly if something ever changes. So if people are used to that Lightning wallets can simply not just be ported to a different applications, and that changes at some point, that applications also inform users that they're a little bit more free now whenever that point happens. But that seems very a very tricky thing to get right. Yeah, cool. Any other thoughts or questions? Anyone listening in? Anybody wants to talk about Lightning backups or anything else we just talked about? Feel free to.
Also,
Well,
if it,
what,
sorry guys, I'm interrupting. Also, if you do have a question and you don't want to raise your hand, you can always tag the Bitcoin design community, and if there's any questions there, I'll be happy to read them off.
Well, I have a question. This is going to sound stupid, but how do we bring Johns up on stage? Because it's got some thing saying he's like requesting to talk or something, and I can't quite figure out this UX.
Yeah, so I invited him already as a speaker. I don't know why I also have a request here, but when I click on it, I don't see options to do anything. Maybe I need to cancel the invite and then invite him again. We'll see. I'll try.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with this request thing. Like every time I try to like tap on him, it like takes me to his profile or something. So
okay, he's in.
What's up?
Hey guys,
Awesome.
Can you hear me?
Hey, yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Did you want to add anything to the topic, Johns, or should we move on to contacts, which then is perfect timing for you to be added?
Yeah, I have nothing on the nothing more to add from what you guys have said.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I guess as just to wrap it up, this is something that we're actively discussing and trying to document. So anybody can join in the Bitcoin Design Slack and or in the GitHub and just help us out, figure out the right way to the right practices and techniques to recommend for users and designers. Okay, cool. Then let's up to contacts. Johns, would you like me to give an intro, or please go ahead, Vash.
Oh no, I was just going to add one comment about backups. Like just kind of what Steve was saying is probably a few years away before we have some kind of interoperable standard. But I think with like L2 and any proof output, if that eventually gets like soft forked into Bitcoin, we'll probably have a kind of backup standard when that comes about. We'll make it a bit more feasible for watchtowers to act as backups, as well as having the ability to have like databases with much smaller sizes to be used as backups, which would probably be a bit more interoperable. Probably initially interoperable between like implementations, but then kind of expand beyond that and hopefully be cross implementations between like C Lightning and LND. But just wanted to kind of throw that in there if anyone wanted to discuss it further.
Yeah, and the goal.
I had one more.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Christoph.
I was just going to say the end goal is always that users don't even notice any of this complexity. They just press a button, things are securely backed up. If it's more complex, they get more complete, very specific or explanations of how they should do things. But ideally, this is never. People don't have to deal with this and figure things out manually.
Well, one more thing I'd add to this conversation. There's a project called Photon, which I think some of you are familiar with, which got off to a good start. It enables backing up a single private key in the cloud, and it's a library that can be integrated into different wallets. That project Tancred was the original developer on it, and he's no longer on a Square Crypto grant. So we need to find more developers to contribute to it. But the roadmap that had me excited about Photon was to also not just back up one private key, but to both support multi-sig and Lightning. And so by supporting Lightning, that would make it easy for any wallet to back up Lightning channel data in the cloud. And if that got a good adoption, that could be a good way to drive forward a standard way to interoperate between different wallets.
If someone's interested in working in that project, what would they need to do?
They can contact Square Crypto, apply for a grant, or they can just start contributing. I mean, any volunteers can, just like any other open source project, they can just start contributing. If they want to get funded, we're happy. We Square Crypto are happy to talk talk about that with them.
Okay, thank you.
And to be clear, I think you're, are you talking about the Photon SDK library, Steve?
Yes.
Okay, so anyone who's interested can go to github.com/photon-SDK to look at that project.
Yeah, there's also, I worked with a little bit with Tancred towards the end of, or beginning of the year, and there were some designs that are already built out for the initial application setup and fairly detailed, I would say. That's kind of archived now too, but I think there's a bunch of material to kick things off if somebody's interested. But let's hop on to contacts, and I'll ask Johns again. Would you like to kick this one off?
I'll have Bosch do the honors because it kind of got revived from some work that he was doing. So for context, that would probably be a good idea for him to kick it off.
Yeah, so I guess based on some research that John's had done previously, I've been kind of working on implementing some like context-based UX into the Zeus Lightning Wallet. Primarily, it kind of, I guess, focuses around Lightning address as being the primary form of contact that you would kind of save in like a contact kind of data format, similar to what Blix is using. I don't know if you guys have used Blix before, but they have like a LN address contact kind of UI UX that kind of integrate into their app. But kind of going with something a little bit different and integrating some research that Johns does, that you can have a lot of other kind of data formats introduced into like a contact kind of data format. Things like descriptors for on-chain stuff. You can integrate like paynims with like Samurai. You could have LNURL pays, Bitcoin offers, Lightning offers, when that comes about. And LN addresses, as well as a bunch of other data that you can introduce into a contact form. You could have stuff like Amboss links, 1ML links, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But kind of been talking with Johns quite a bit about how I guess we could kind of have some standard way to represent this Bitcoin contact-based UX and share it like between different Bitcoin wallets. I know we've talked about like vCard and JCard. vCard's kind of what like iOS uses, as well as like, you know, Outlook and a lot of other really popular apps. But there's also JCard, which is pretty much vCard in like a JSON format. It's a little bit easier to kind of interpret and pass that data between applications. So just been kind of talking about that a whole lot. But I guess Johns could kind of elaborate a bit more on the technical side and how that's kind of going about, if you wanted to add anything there, Johns.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. Yeah, so I've been doing some research on this. I think a lot of you kind of, or some of you know about this, talking about like a few, like I call them Bitcoin design abstractions. And one of these things are the contact abstraction. There's 4 I'm working on documenting right now. Contacts, wallet messaging, payment requests, and transaction builder with some queued operations and stuff. So focusing on the contacts one. Okay, so like why, like what's not obvious about having contacts in a Bitcoin wallet? Well, first of all, if you have a wallet provider who is storing your contacts in like some kind of cloud stuff, like the Chivo wallet, for example, and those things, there's a possibility where the different identifiers that you have, they can get replaced, and if the service is hacked, they get replaced, and then when you try to make a payment to a certain destination, it goes to the wrong place. So that's not going to be good. So in being like privacy preserving and all that, going with our Bitcoin design principles, we perhaps can start modeling our contacts just as you have them on your phone, where they're stored locally, right? And using something like Photon, then it could be backed up to the person's own cloud storage and whatnot, instead of centralized on the wallet provider's servers. Okay, so then what kind of what kind of things are stored in a contact. So regular contact on your phone allows you to, put phone numbers and email addresses and notes and such and such. In Bitcoin, contacts can also have these kind of like identifiers, like a lightning address, as Bosch mentioned, a output descriptor, which I group some of these into like a category, like I kind of call like address or invoice generators, right? Because it's like something that's able to generate an invoice or address for you. So that could even be a link to a BTC Pay server, right? So now a user flow could look like when you select a contact, if you want to send some funds, you select the contact and the invoice could be taken from, from that invoice generator, whether it's an output descriptor, which is like more cryptographically secure, or whether it's like one of those like resolvable identifiers, like a BTC Pay server or a Lightning address, or BIP, what do you call it, LNURL endpoint and such. Okay, so extending context a little bit more now, there are some use cases that it can support that provide tools for designers to kind of get like a little bit more creative in Bitcoin applications, right? So what do I mean by that? Okay, so there are some payment operations. For instance, if you're trying to set up a multi-sig, usually what we've been seeing so far is multi-sig setup for like an individual. It's not so, or like an individual and a remote service, like for example, Casa. What we're not seeing very much of is, multi-sigs with groups of people, like between wallets, right? And I think that's like a very interesting opportunity for us to explore. Why can't we have, just like on your chat apps, you select a few people that you want inside of the chat group, and you start having conversations there. Why can't we do the same thing with multisig? So this is one of the use cases for a contact, especially those. Especially if you have these kind of like communication identifiers, something to kind of like send a message between contacts, some way to contact another person. Yeah. So so, other kinds of use cases can be, if you have the node address or some other kinds of endpoints, you can start creating payment channels with that person, right? And of course, with that like with some kind of like messaging system, like peer-to-peer messaging system, you'll also be able to chat with the person, if you want to start introducing that into Bitcoin applications. So yeah, that's the contacts in a nutshell. I'll leave it for comment, I guess. Any questions?
People want to talk, by the way, in the chat, they can press the raise hand emoji down the bottom. I'm pretty new to Footy Spaces, so I'm just kind of figuring this out as I go.
So I've been posting some links. If you look in the space, I've been pasting relevant links to what we're discussing in the comments there, and I posted a link to a prototype for contacts that John's put together. It's looking really nice. Kind of helps you visualize what he was just describing. And, one thing I say about it, John's, is that I really like how when I go through it and I click on a contact in your prototype, and I can see like all the different, ways that I can pay this contact. I can, see that they've got like a BTC Pay server address and a Lightning address and yada, yada. This feels very intuitive to me because this reminds me of, say, Gmail or Apple Contacts or something like that. So you have one contact, but then that contact has, multiple phone numbers, multiple email addresses, et cetera, et cetera. So, this is a very familiar feeling experience to me.
I also feel like there's a similar issue from what we talked about with Lightning Backup, is that there are just so many different ways of connecting. technical ways through nodes and channels and Lightning addresses and LN URL and whatnot, and it can be pretty confusing too. That having an abstraction layer for people where they just think about, okay, I'm interacting with this company, I'm interacting with this person, and kind of exactly what's happening under the hood is a little bit abstracted away, and it can change over time. Would also be a helpful thing.
The contact stuff also kind of relates to what we were talking about initially with backups. Like, it would be good to have some kind of like standard format for contacts, so people could back that up, say to their iCloud, and then import that into like a new wallet they set up, and it could recognize the format that they're using. And that's kind of what was mentioned before about the J card, like using a JSON format. It wouldn't be a whole lot of work to, I guess, really have apps interpret that data and pass what's relevant to them. I know there is certain scenarios where some apps might not be Lightning and some apps might be Lightning only or on-chain only, where they may only want to like pass certain contact info that's relevant to that app. Like, say, for example, if you wanted to like import a contacts-based data format into Samurai, which doesn't have like, or obviously all the Lightning data wouldn't be relevant to that because they don't use Lightning, but like say descriptors or paynames would be relevant, so they would only want to pass that kind of stuff. These are other things to consider when I'm kind of thinking about these kind of standard contact formats. But yeah.
Sorry, I stopped hearing everyone, so I don't know if there's any questions. But one other thing to add about the contacts that I didn't mention before, there is this thing which you can do in Lightning, which is if we call it like channel selection, and like choosing like the first and the last hop. And the other thing is coin selection, which is used quite a bit in like privacy wallets, like choosing, coin control, choosing like whichever UTXO you want. The abstraction of contacts also applies to this. So it's meant to be kind of like all encompassing for like both on and off chain user experience. And the benefit of having the contact is that you can now start doing some more clever kind of like automatic but still more intelligent coin or channel selection, which can perhaps like help you like reduce on fees and whatnot, or safeguard your privacy in the case of on chain.
Does anyone implement this right now? And what are we doing for this in the guide?
Well, in terms of implementation, hopefully Zeus goes about it. Cipher, they were it's a React-based mobile wallet with some privacy focus. They started implementing some stuff like that. There are some other wallets that have, I think, maybe a more traditional contact-like feature, but not necessarily like the local first approach. I think Blix also has such a kind of functionality in it as well.
Hey, Rocky, you just requested to become a speaker. Would you like to chime in on the topic?
Yeah, I would. Thank you very much for that. I'm the lead crypto designer on Cash App, and I follow everything that you guys do every week, and I'm so impressed with your work. And I had a question for you as you're talking about the contacts. I'm still learning so much about Lightning, but one of the questions that I had is on this topic of contacts, how can you actually have, like, let's say I'm going to send to Steven or I'm going to send to Johns, how can I have them as a stable contact if the best practice is related to like recycling their public key every single time? If their wallet is recycling their public key and I have them as a contact, how do I know what the most up-to-date key is, like the most refreshed key, so that those things can be in sync?
Okay. So there, as I explained earlier, there was this concept of like a output descriptor. Now, I'm not certain on how like security problems with like handing out output descriptors to people. But yeah, so what an output descriptor does, or an XPub, it allows you, like if you have one of them, you're able to generate a bunch of different addresses, like up to 4 billion, 2 point something billion hardened. You're able to generate addresses in some other, like in some application, and this is typically what like hardware wallets let you do, or like these watch only wallets. You put in an XPub or output descriptor in there, and then it's able to generate addresses. It doesn't have the it's not able to generate private keys from that, just addresses. But you also have these invoice generators as well, right? So Lightning address, you could look at this. You could look at this as an invoice generator, right? BTC Pay Server, which is this kind of like merchant payment processing thing. If you have it there, you're able to generate addresses and invoices on demand. So and the other solution that you have there for identifiers is the Bolt12, right? So you're able to give someone one Bolt12. They add the name of that contact, however they want to identify that person in human readable, and instead of a phone number, you add the Bolt12 invoice, and then now you can continue to make payments to that person without having any further interaction with them in terms of like communication.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Are you guys covering this in the guide anywhere? These output descriptors?
Output descriptors, we have it in the glossary, but I'm trying to like wrap up some of my research on this topic. It's a bit more like bleeding edge, so it wasn't like ready for the guide at the time. So I'm hopefully going in the next few weeks. I'll be publishing some notes and specifications on a few of these abstractions that I've been researching.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much for taking the time to explain that, Johnson.
Sure, and if you want to talk about it, I'm very eager. I'm very eager to talk to people about it. So please, reach out.
I'd like to add a brief point onto what John said there. When we're talking about XPubs, when we're talking about XPubs, it's important to remember that that's like not the kind of thing that you should really go around giving out to people. Like in the case he's talking about, like BTC Pay Server, like BTC Pay Server can use it to generate fresh addresses. So, your website could generate invoices or something like that. But, I wouldn't just go out, giving XPubs to anybody, because then they'll be able to, essentially be able to generate addresses, and they're not going to be able to take your money, but you're going to lose a little bit of privacy. I think the important thing to the distinction to make between like on-chain versus Lightning is that with Lightning, we essentially do have, it would be technically inaccurate to call it an address, but we do have kind of a consistent address in a sense, and that we're sending to a node, right? We're routing to a specific node every single time. So if you send 10 payments to somebody's Lightning wallet, in other words, 10 payments to their Lightning node, you are, that node identifier is going to be the same every single time. If you're sending 10 payments to somebody on chain and they're doing it right, then it's going to be a different address every time. So the beauty, and I think in what Johns is doing with his contact app, is that if you are sending on chain to somebody 10 times, you don't. Right now, the best solution we have is just that you type out a little memo in your phone when you send the Bitcoin transaction, right? And like there's nothing in typing out somebody's. You could type your friend's name into the memo, but that there's nothing in the data structure to like unify all of that as to one. So I think kind of the beauty is that like if you're going to the same coffee shop every day and they're using BTC Pay Server and generating the invoice every single day, you could tap on your phone and assign it to a certain contact without having to keep track of all these invoices or keep track of all these, on-chain addresses or whatever it is, whatever the context or the situation is. You can just have the contact as as an abstraction layer above that.
Thank you for describing that, Stephen. I appreciate that.
Not simple, this stuff. Hey, John, I think you got kicked out. Are you back in?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I just let him back in.
Old phone problems. I guess.
Just something that you mentioned, kind of then Rocky as well, when you're talking about it. You said, how would you know that data is like still relevant to that user? I think that's something also to consider. Like if someone shares a descriptor with you, for example, and then maybe you want to send them a payment like 6 months down the line, like for all you know, they've moved wallets and they've have new private keys. I know, for example, this is something I do. So like, how would you know that descriptor is still relevant towards that user and those addresses you're generating from that descriptor still relate to that user? Verifying that, I'm not too sure how you'd go about that, but that's just something to kind of keep in mind. I know you kind of mentioned that. I'm not sure if that's where you're kind of going with your question, but that would be something that would be also worth considering when thinking about sharing descriptors with people, is how you'd verify that that descriptor is still like a relevant descriptor to use. It's similar in the sense of when people like share PGP keys on their forums and they update them regularly and they post, they share posts and they sign it with their new PGP private key and they say like this one's outdated and this is a new one, kind of thing. Like maybe need some kind of like system in place like that. But maybe that's not super relevant to what you're asking, but just thought I'd add that in there.
I think also with regards to that, there's this what you're describing is like revocations, right? Like how can you state that it's no longer valid, like this key is no longer valid and stuff. And unfortunately, like ideally it would be great to have such kind of thing like built in somehow. With the tech that we have now, I don't see how it exists. But one argument could be that if you have a phone number on your phone, it doesn't necessarily, and on your local contacts, and you're trying to make a call to someone, you're gonna try to make like that call, and it's gonna say, hey, it's no one's on the other side. In Bitcoin, unfortunately, you're gonna be sending some funds. So perhaps to mitigate that, like if the address is too old, then the UI, the designer can start like thinking about, okay, well, perhaps you could ping with a small amount and see if the person on the other side received it, or you're having some kind of communication with that person, hopefully. Whether out of band, and I think on the next topic is about like wallet messaging and stuff, but perhaps we can like also have some kind of like messaging system to make that query.
Yeah, and we're already 45 minutes in. Let's actually hop over to the next topic, and that one is self-custodial inter-app communication. So I'll try to make sense of that one. So let's say you have a completely self-custodial wallet. So there's no server handling anything for you. It's just on your phone. And there's another application that you use and you want to make a payment in there. So what would the UX look like if I interact, if I make that payment with my wallet in this other application in a way that I don't necessarily have to click back and forth all the time? Especially if we think about, let's say, micropayments, where maybe payments are being made as I'm listening to a podcast. Every minute, some sats are deducted, kind of like how Breeze works, or just other use cases where you want a very seamless interaction between the two applications, and there's no real server component. Steve, that is a topic that you brought up. Did I frame that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's a good setup. I would just add that I think a good example. Imagine like you have a poker app on your phone, Texas Hold'em, where you're making like several bets per hand, and I don't think a good user experience would be for each time you want to bet, you have to generate a Lightning invoice. Switch to another app, which is your Bitcoin wallet, confirm the payment, and then go back to the poker app. I think that's a showstopper. I think everyone would agree that's a showstopper user experience. So if that's not a good user experience, what should it look like? The other thing I'd add, I don't think a future in which a wallet is built into each application is the right direction either. Because imagine, if this becomes popular, an individual might have a dozen or more apps or services on their phone which facilitate Bitcoin payments, and you don't want to have to manage 12 different wallets. It would fragment your money. Technically speaking, it would fragment your UTXOs. It's also a horrible way to scale Bitcoin. So if we have a design constraint of one wallet for the user, what should it look like, particularly for non-custodial wallets, which, as you mentioned, ideally do not have a server.
I'm having a little bit of a flashback to a conversation we had on another call last week, where we were reviewing a Blixt wallet, and the same thing and this isn't to pick on Blixt because I really like what they're doing, but it was just a conversation kind of rabbit hole we went down where I made a comment about the fact that there's what's called a Lightning browser, I think, within the app, and you kind of gives you these different kind of Lightning integrated services, like I don't know, exchanges and games and things like that, and you tap on one of them and it opens up a little web browser within the app. And I had noticed that Breeze had kind of done the same thing, and I made this remark about, like, well, if I'm using the PayPal app or if I'm using Cash App, I don't have to have a web browser inside of Cash App in order to buy something on the internet, or I don't have to have a web browser inside of PayPal in order to buy something with my PayPal account. And so it's like this kind of, and so everyone else educated me about why that was. It's this issue of how do you get your Lightning wallet to talk to these services, and kind of the easiest implementation right now is just kind of put a browser inside of the wallet, and it's a good workaround for the time being. But I'm definitely looking forward to figuring out this inter-app communication thing, so that we don't need to have a browser inside of every Lightning wallet.
Yeah, and I think for that specific use case of interacting with websites, I think there is a solution in iOS 15 called browser extensions, basically, where an application can also have a browser extension, which then allows the website to make calls or make requests that the browser extension then can serve or react to. That might be just a technical way to go about this. I think always this is one of the things where you have to loot out the technical possibilities and then also look at it from a user experience perspective and see how you can match them.
Hello, my name is Dulce. I'm happy to be here. And I want to bring to the conversation, like, for what Steve explained, maybe it would be good to do some discoveries and some future outputs that we can have with each options, because I think if we do some design or discovering brainstorming will be helpful to see, if we do that, let's say we use only one wallet, what would be the consequence in terms of privacy in the future if we do profiles? Like, I'm just giving another example. Like, the way I like to have my information, I have different profiles for different apps or emails. Maybe if we have some hypothesis to test, would be very useful, because we can understand the trade-offs of each decision. That was my 2 cents.
Thanks for that. Makes total sense. Who else would like to chime in on this topic?
I could say a few words, I guess. Is anyone else talking?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so inter-app communication, or like app-to-app communication. So as we were talking about contacts, we stated that there's some parts of these, like payment operations that require like some kind of coordination, some kind of like messaging coordination. For example, like multi-sig, a PSBT has to be passed around like multiple devices, right? So yeah, when we talk about and this is another abstraction that we've been looking into, but more under like the separate devices, something called wallet messaging. When you have so you want two wallets to be able to talk to one another. There needs to be some kind of messaging system. That messaging system could be something like Tor, or it can be the Lightning Network itself. I know we had some discussions earlier about that. Using something like KeySend and like passing the data as chunks, the transaction file as chunks, right? In smaller pieces, effectively. When it's within the same application now, one concept that I was starting to think about is that if we could use like application deep linking, I'm not sure what amount of data is able to be transmitted in this kind of way. For what I understand, it's there are limitations, especially with iOS, for like sharing storage. Like if one application establishes, like creates a folder on the device, it can't necessarily give permissions to separate applications. So we need to start figuring out like some kind of workarounds, and that's where like the deep linking thing comes in. And deep linking is essentially when you click on like I don't know I guess like something like Mail.to, right? It has like the Mail.to URI. And then it'll open like your mail app, whichever set its default, right? But then there's also like this like every application has their own URI scheme. So like Facebook is like Facebook : and stuff, and a lot of Bitcoin applications, they try to like compete for like Bitcoin and Lightning URI. So any link that you click on a website or something with like Bitcoin : or Lightning : then it's gonna try to open the first app on iOS, the first app that you install, basically. But this mechanism can possibly be used to transmit data to another application, so that's when kind of like some kind of like connection information can be shared, and the other kinds of things that you would need for this use case in terms of poker, you would need a way to extract funds from a wallet without any interactions from a wallet on the device without any interactions from the user, right? Because you don't want to see notifications that pop up and say like, hey, please approve this message and whatnot. And to do that, we need some kind of like pull payment kind of system. And in Bitcoin, we do not have pull payments, right? Everything is a push payment. And the difference is like when you subscribe, like when you try to, when you use Netflix or any of these kind of services, you put in your credit card, Netflix is able to, or their payment processor is able to pull money out of your account, right? Without you interacting. That's how, I'm not going to talk about how bad that business model is, but in Bitcoin, Netflix would have to ask you to make that payment, and then you would have to approve it, right? Because you have to sign the transaction, or on Lightning, I guess you're still signing stuff, right? You need to sign something, so you need to be online and you need to be signing something. So if we could create some kind of like pull-based system with a limited like scope or a limited amount of funds within the application, then we're able to play that poker game without interruptions up to a certain limit, up to a certain amount. And then if the hand, or I don't know what you call it, the pot runs out, I don't know poker terms, but if you run out of funds, then through deep linking, we may be able to make a request in the other application, and the amount and everything that's being requested can pop up in the target application, and then you'd be able to what do you call it, approve like a new budget, and then go back to the to playing a game.
John, is what you're mentioning something, the deep linking something like when you hit the share button and it takes you to a different app?
Yes, exactly. That's effectively it. Yeah.
Okay.
If
If
it's alright to chime in, my name is Sergey.
Yes,
I'm the CEO of Bitrefill. We've spent a lot of time on working on this part, on making sure that people can actually pay from their wallet, which is a surprisingly difficult problem, especially on iOS, for all the reasons that we just heard. One thing that does work, and the way that this is handled in email, is that you often see in well-designed apps, for example, when they link you to check for the verification link in your email, and then the app has a widget where it has the names of commonly used mail apps. So on iOS, it's Gmail, it's Apple's mail app, it's Outlook, and so on. And this is something that we can do with Bitcoin wallets, and we started building support for that. Unfortunately, not that many wallets expose a deep link URI on iOS, or at least as far as we couldn't find any good list of deep links per brand of wallet, right? And so this is, I guess, also somewhat of a wishful thinking type of thing, because we're never going to get all wallets there, but we could get many. And I think it would be worthwhile to work on compiling this list.
Yeah, that's one of the challenges as well, as we start seeing more wallets start popping up. As how do you keep track of this kind of directory and stuff? Because it is going to have to be some proprietary share screen. Twitter has one very similar. If you try to share a tweet in Twitter, this app here, it shows you some of the some of the apps that it has in its kind of directory or whatever we want to call that. So perhaps we could start seeing some kind of deep link directory set up, and some components, UI components developed, where developers can quickly integrate these kind of things. And do you know how much data you're able to transact in this, by the way? Not to get too technical, but I'm just curious.
In what? In the deep link?
In the deep link, yeah.
Not sure, but enough. I think it was a good question. I don't know.
Yeah. Enough for a PSBT?
I would think so, but I guess it depends on the size of the PSBT, right? Probably not 100 kilobytes.
All right. Well, thanks.
It sounds like a pretty good hackathon project for somebody to dive super deep into that one, see what can be hacked together. So how much is any of this possible today at all, or are we really how far are we with this in the bigger picture for users? Is there anything I can use, or do we have nothing?
I think Sergey said that they're already doing stuff with that, right? We just, we need a second application to support it, first of all. And but in terms of technology, we're not creating anything new, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. These are things that exist. Even the stuff with context that I mentioned earlier, these things exist. It's just, putting them together in, a different way.
Yeah, if I can make one more somewhat shameless plug, we spent a lot of effort on building a wallet selector on Bitrefill, which is a UI flow where the user will optionally, right, if they choose to, type in which brand of wallet they're using, and based on that, we make certain adaptations of the payment experience to work optimally well with that particular wallet. And so that's something where we're right now iterating relatively fast on figuring out, different intricacies of different wallets, and it's become the way that we deal with the fact that there is a
lack of standards with these things, and iOS breaks things, and all of the difficulties that we have. But presumably this is something that we might someday release in some type of open source fashion, but it's nowhere near in a state where that could happen right now. But it's good for inspiration. That was my point, to have a look at what's being done.
And for Bitrefill, this is specifically about pulling up the website and making a purchase, clicking a link, and then paying it with another wallet that is on my phone. Do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I mean, paying with Bitcoin basically from a wallet, or exchange, or what have you. Things that people pay from.
Yeah, I was just curious if it's paying to a website from an application.
It's paying to a Bitcoin address. So we're starting from. It is a website, but it's also available in app form. But it's in a web view. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. I've been trying a lot of Lightning apps and in these kind of Lightning directories in different wallets, and I think the Bitrefill one is one of the good ones that I've that's been pretty intuitive, nice and mobile, and all of that. But it seems like all three topics that we talked about today, every single topic, it's like, yeah, we're working on it. Things are maturing. We're figuring things out. Maybe that's kind of the current state of more sophisticated Lightning use, where we have a good foundation, but there's still a lot of things that just that we still all need to figure out together.
Yeah, but it's good to share who's built what, and so that people can look and provide feedback. That's my secret incentive, is that I hope to get feedback on how to improve it further.
Yeah, excellent. And that's what Alexa, go ahead. Didn't mean to reply.
Thank you, Christoph, and thank you, Sergey. This makes me think that a lot of what we're talking about is interoperability and building on standards and actually communicating, because so many people are working on the same issues. And I wonder if this could fit in with the wallet improvement project. I don't know, Pavlonex, I know you're not speaking, but it seems like, is there a way that we as a community could help support some of these issues, perhaps in discussions or something of the sort? Maybe we could keep some kind of a list of what the wallet's features are and create discussions around them so that we know. So we have a contact point for developers that they could join in the discussion or something like that. I don't know. I'm just thinking it's about sort of building bridges so people can talk to each other, and maybe spaces like these help, but maybe having something else could work too.
Pavlonex, would you like to share your wallet improvement project there?
Yeah, but I wasn't sure what was the question that Alex asked. So in theory, we should strive for standards, but as Sergey mentioned, in practice, it really doesn't work that way. It's very hard to get developers to agree on things. And I do disagree with Sergey on one point, and that is that we need to build UIs to support all of these wallets. I understand that from the business perspective, but hopefully this won't become a standard where we need to build support for every single wallet. It's similar what BitPay has with their checkout. Their checkout is now 5-step process in order to pay a simple Bitcoin invoice. So that can illustrate quite well how interoperability isn't working in this space right now. And with wallet improvement projects, what we are doing at Bitcoin Design Community, basically, we're trying to suggest improvements to all of these wallets and in a way make them obey the best practices. I know this sounded harsh, but we're trying to experiment with all sorts of wallets and see how we can fit all of these standards and best practices together. So what we do is we review wallet and then suggest changes and then we add back those changes back into the Bitcoin Design Guide. So hopefully Bitcoin Design Guide will one day be this all-in-one resource where wallets will get best practices for all of these things in order for everything to work smoothly across different applications. But yeah, as Sergey mentioned, right now it's very tricky to make all of things compatible. So I can feel their pain as a merchant for sure.
Yeah, to elaborate on your point here, I mean, you're right that we need standards to evolve, but as you also know, there is no forward compatibility practices or protocols, which means that if we don't do it like that, then we have the same payment experience that we had in 2013, because the dominant wallets do not upgrade or support it and so on. And it's decentralization. So I think this is like what we found by using the inconvenience of this mechanism is that it allows us to faster implement new standards, to make them standard, or to make them default, but also to be able to catch cases where user gets strange and unusual behavior, and they can pick in their wallet, and we make adjustments for their particular thing.
Yeah, but I assume you have like 2 or 3 people working on this full time, or at least one single person trying to catch all of these things. It sounds like quite, or at least you have good user feedback in order to implement all of this stuff.
Yeah, we don't have anyone full time, but it's part of, I guess, we hear from support and pass it on to developers, and we upgrade it. There's a list of certain properties, like for on-chain Bitcoin, which wallet support BC1 addresses and which wallet supports which flags, things like that. We try to maintain a table of features, and then there's a bunch of if this then that, if this wallet, then we actually just show a special dialogue or things like that.
Yeah, okay, exactly. That's the problem we're trying to solve as well, because it's hard for merchants specifically merchants try to figure all this stuff out. And if we leave all of the decisions to single wallets, then it's chaotic. So what we do is basically try to be a bridge in communication between user and developer, and try to, also communicate clearly to all the developers, because miscommunication is often like a big gap in these features and how they get merged in. So hopefully we as a community, as we review wallets, for example, if we see that wallets are using lowercase, BC1 address, we can then recommend them on the reasoning why they should support uppercase as well, because, QR codes are then way more lightweight and things like that. So yeah, it's quite a bit of a process, to be honest, but hopefully we as a community we cannot solve all of these problems, but we can maybe make some minor improvements, or hopefully one day bigger improvements in making wallets compatible, or at least bring some of the best practices to them so that they can implement it.
It's tedious, but the goal is that Bitcoin has the most badass user experience possible. So I think that's worthwhile, at least in my mind.
Well, with Lightning, these things work relatively well, and there's quite few adaptations that are needed. So, maybe there is value in just pushing companies to add support for Lightning. Many of these problems would resolve itself.
Yeah, I agree. Lightning fixes quite a lot of payment UX things, but as people develop new stuff, it's also hard to keep track of all of the things that appear, for example, LN URL. So we noticed like some wallets didn't support it and things like that. So it's on us to create all of these best practices, and also because I think really we need to communicate these things clearly to developers. Once they really understand, like, well, the reasoning behind this is this and that, instead of yelling at them on Twitter, like, implement this. They don't understand it. So us as a community, if we manage to communicate this clearly and add it to the guide, and then have a relationship with developers, we can, make all of these small wins. And to anybody willing to look into the wallet improvement project, you can come to our Slack. There is like a GitHub issue where we are basically testing a bunch of wallets, filing issues into their repositories, and then we're tracking all of these small wins that we have as a community. And at the end of the day, we merge those learnings from our reviews back into the Bitcoin Design Guide, which hopefully one day will be all-in-one resource for application developers.
And it's actually kind of fun. You just test out some wallets and gather your feedback and chat about it. And I think the next session for that one will be reviewing backups, which is also related to what we talked about earlier. So now we're a little bit an hour and 10 in. If everybody wants to keep chatting, we can keep chatting, but we can also try to tie things up if you're all tired of it. Any more comments? Any urgent topics you'd like to discuss, or should we call it a day for now?
Well, I would just like to say thank you to everyone who's chimed up. It's really nice to hear new people on these calls, and I guess that's one of the reasons why we moved them to Twitter Spaces. But also, after this call, we have our Slack channel and our work on the Bitcoin Design Guide that we would love to see all of you come talk about and help out and discuss as well. So that's at bitcoin.design. And yeah, look forward to hearing you again next time.
Thanks, everybody. I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
See ya. Catch you later.